Hello there, and welcome to Alpha Wolf Trading Stocks to Watch for next week. I'm Tim, coming at you with my list of stocks to watch. I'm gonna, I've been trying to uh, bring these videos down, condense them a bit, so they're not so lengthy in duration. Uh, but I've got a good list of stocks today to go over. By no means is it my entire list of stocks to watch. I've got a uh, full-blown alert list of stocks that I like the setups on. As I go through the uh, the scans, I have to tell you, there are a tremendous amount of good-looking technical setups out there, and it's not all that shocking when you've got a market that continues to grind to new highs, right? I will tell you this, and normally I do a market wrap of sectors, and I'm not going to go through all the sectors. I can tell you that there are a lot of good looking sectors out there. Um, you know, Transportation is an interesting area for potential bounce. IBB is looking great for maybe a breakout. IWM is looking fairly strong, but I can tell you that there are a lot of sectors out there that are overbought and have been overbought for a while. And that's not to say that things can't stay overbought; they can. But we have a big week coming up this week, and it really could determine whether or not we see continued strength and more new highs, or if we actually see some type of a pause or the beginning of some type of a correction. And I say correction, I'm not suggesting a full-blown bear market. I'm just suggesting some type of a correction to get rid of some of the complacency that's out there and maybe shake out some of the bulls. We'll see what happens. This is going to be a very, very interesting week. And let's take a look at the economic indicators that we could be dealing with, or we will be dealing with next week. And that's PMI composite, existing home sales, Case-Shiller, consumer confidence, investor confidence, mortgage applications, new home sales, um, petroleum status report, of course, durable goods, international trade jobless claims. Uh, but the big deal is we've got the FOMC meeting, which begins on Tuesday, and then we've got the FOMC announcement, which is on Wednesday. That could impact the markets, right? And then we've got GDP on Friday. That could impact the markets. We've got, petroleum status report, Baker Hughes rig count, which is always interesting for, the oil markets, which actually pulled back a little bit yesterday. But um, a lot of stuff going on in terms of economic data, right? So that could impact the markets. Then we've got earnings. Now, earningswhispers.com, so what does this mean? We've got earnings. So what? Well, it's a big deal, right? Because you don't really, as a trader, you may not be comfortable holding a stock into a earnings event, right? Make sure that if you're looking at playing a stock, make sure that you take a look at Earnings Whisper and see when their earnings are coming up, just to make sure you have, so you're at least knowledgeable as to when they might be reporting. Not every stock that will be reporting next week is on this list, right? Just these are the most anticipated stocks for next week to keep an eye on. So, uh, this is going to be a huge week for earnings, and because we have such a broad representation of so many different sectors. We've got airlines reporting. We have steel stocks. We have semiconductors. We have industrial names, right? Stanley Black and Decker, ITW, 3M, right? I mean, we've got transportation, trucking. We've got home builders. We've got robotics. We've got biotech. I mean, we have um, telecom, right? We've got social media, Facebook, Twitter. Just a really, really, and then we've got the big oils, right? So we've got a lot going on in terms of earnings next week, and it could be a big deal. I mean, like I said, on a lot of these sectors, we have I mean, they look great, but they're overbought. and there's a lot of complacency out there. And even if earnings are fantastic, even if they're tremendous, doesn't mean that the stocks are going to continue to run or they're going to break out to all-time highs. Because, I mean, look at Microsoft, right? Microsoft had a tremendous earnings report. It was awesome. Crushed it. What happened? Post market, big gap up to like $76, $77, somewhere in that area. Look where it closed on Friday, right? It was down. I think it actually finished out a little bit red on the day. So, why did that happen? Well, because it ran 9 out of 10 days, and we'll look at the chart in a second. It ran out of 9 out of 10 days into that earnings report. So it was priced in. Keep that in mind. So if you haven't followed me before, I'm just going to break down real quickly. What are all these boxes? Well, listen, I go through each one of these companies that are going to report. I take a look at their charts, and then it helps me make a determination as to, is this something that I am really interested in their earnings report because I want to trade that particular stock, or is it I'm interested in how their earnings come in because I want to see if maybe I can find some sympathy plays within the same space to play, not necessarily that stock. Well, or maybe I just want to know how it's going to impact the sector. So the black boxes are stocks that I'm very interested in the earnings, however, not so much interested in trading the individual name. The green boxes, on the other hand, are I'm interested in the earnings and potentially interested in trading the name depending how earnings come in, right? So we'll go over some of these names and why I'm looking at them and some of them are for very different reasons, but we will take a look at that and see how things go. All right, and I mean, we have such a broad range. I think it's going to be a really, really interesting week for earnings. So make sure, if you're looking at a stock, look up Earnings Whisper and see if you have a stock that is reporting in the next week. All right, before you take the trade. All right, so TEAR. This is the first stock in my list of stocks to watch. And before I go there, let's just take a look at some of these sectors real quick. Look at the NASDAQ, right? We are overbought, and we're up a lot of days in a row, right? So we're overbought. And does that mean that we can't stay overbought? No, it does not. We could continue to stay overbought. IBB, arguably my favorite looking space sector out there, right? We've got a lot of biotechs that are reporting here. We're coming up into an area of resistance. We're piercing the upper Bollinger Band. We're up 4 days in a row, and we're overbought, right? IWM, overbought, right? Up into an area of resistance, overbought. That is a little bit concerning to me. IYT, not overbought, right? Pulling back to an area of potential bounce, right? Potential support, 50 EMA. Stochastics just starting to curl up a little bit. We'll see what happens. We've got several airlines that are reporting this week. So, robotics. A lot of robotics names reporting this week. Overbought, have been overbought. We could stay overbought for a long period of time, but it's concerning to me if we don't crush and raise guidance. You might see some of these sectors take a pause or get a bit of a pullback. So just keep that. S&P 500, same thing, overbought. All right, so now let's go back to the actual stocks to watch list and start blasting through them. So TIER. A lot of shorts tried to jump on this name on Friday, and it was the first day of the pop. This stock just did a reverse split. It just broke a long-term trend line, and it has a tendency to be a pop and flopper, and I think that's why so many shorts jumped on this name. it traded. I mean, it had a press release. The press was decent. I mean, it was decent news. They had something approved, I think, over in Europe, and massive volume. Right, it traded the entire float roughly for what, 5 times? No, 4 times. 5 million shares. Trade 20 million shares. Uh, Pretty impressive, right? What we could see on this is a red to green move, and maybe we see a pullback to 3 or just under 3, right? See if that what acted as support and acted as resistance. See if that acts as support again. Maybe you get a red to green, and then that emboldens shorts to try and jump on the name again, and then that gives you the fuel to actually take out Friday's high. Maybe even go up, test that 200-day, or take that 200-day out. You take the 200-day out. Like if we were to come do a red to green, come up here and test the 200 and flag out, and then bust through that 200-day, that would be, you could get a pretty impressive move out of that, especially if it's on some big volume. So the way I'd be looking at this is some kind of a red to green move, pull back to 290, maybe even pull back to 260 area, see if that holds as support, and then get a reverse and bounce, potentially take out, test the previous day's high, and if take that out, maybe scale out some at just underneath the $4 holla, right? So look for some type of a red to green intraday setup on TEAR. Could be decent for a day trading opportunity. All right, DRNA, another one that had a pretty big move on Friday. Now this one, actually this is the second day of the move on this, and right into an area of price resistance, $4 holla. Did manage to close above, but piercing the upper Bollinger Band, looking for maybe the same thing, maybe a red to green move. Maybe it consolidates here right in the $4 area. Maybe you get a pull back to $3 and maybe it drifts back to 370, and 370 acts as support. Maybe 380, right? Look for a pullback to 380, red to green. Day trading opportunity, possibly. Insider buy in November, 371. Okay, that was a while ago. I mean, it just broke out, and it did manage to close near the high of the day. It's not completely overbought. Decent volume pump. We'll see if this one has any kind of red to green action worth having on the radar. Plug, another one that typically is a pop and flopper. Some news related to Walmart on Friday. Gap didn't get any follow through, but I have to tell you, I'm kind of impressed with where it closed. It closed in the upper portion of the candle, and really it closed right on top of this area of price resistance, $3.40, let's call it. All right, it did manage to close right on top of that, so maybe that's trying to act as support. I don't know. 221 million shares in the float, 15% short interest. Maybe a red to green move on this one too. All right, 225 appears to be an area, or 226 in that area seems to be an area of potential support. If it pulls back to 225, maybe that's a place to take it for a little bounce, little scalp trade. I really wouldn't hold this one overnight for a swing, but I guess it really depends on the price action. But worth keeping an eye on Plug for a potential red to green move. CN, this is one that I actually like for a long-term hold or swing, and I've been watching it, and I really, my ideal entry would have been down here at a gap fill down about 24 bucks, and it got down to about $24.70, where there is some price support, and actually bounced nicely right off of there. So broke the trend line on Friday, closed over the $26 holla. Maybe this goes up and tests this 27.55. But this one's approaching overbought. But this could be a maybe a little short-term swing on a continuation of this move. I really would like to buy this for a long-term hold or swing somewhere in the 25 or below area, but we'll see if this gets any kind of follow-through next week. MGM reports next week, and look what it's done. It's had a move of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days out of basically 9 days. It's moved up, and it just got added, I think, to one of the indexes. You know, look, it's going to have to crush. I mean, my view on MGM right now is that the upside versus the potential downside, I think the upside is probably limited. I'm looking for MGM on a pullback to an area of potential support to get long in the long-term hold portfolio. I actually had this name for a while and sold out of it, and now I'm looking to get back in. And I kind of regret where I sold it, but you know, we'll have to see if maybe I get another opportunity somewhere near 30, 28 in that area. I think MGM becomes very compelling for a long-term hold position. It's got nearly 500 million shares in the float, so it's a thicker stock, definitely more of a long-term hold type play. DR Horton, beautiful. This has got a beautiful looking setup heading into earnings, which are, where is it? Wednesday before the open. Okay, so Wednesday before the open, DR Horton, beautiful looking chart. Now maybe it breaks out of this over this trend line heading into those earnings, and I think, let me back this out. All-time highs. You're in blue skies with this DR Horton. So, you know, could be. I mean, it's a thicker stock. 338 million shares in the float. You know, if it breaks out over 37 off of earnings, then maybe you look to watch this for a pullback to 37. What was resistance becomes support. Maybe that's a place to take it for a swing. I like to buy things on pullbacks. The other thing that could happen is we could get a pop heading into earnings, right? So maybe it breaks over that trend line, you get a pop. Maybe you can take a little trade in it before earnings hit. But I wouldn't hold through the event, right? Unless you're just holding some small lottos. But really does have a pretty looking technical setup on the daily time frame. AMD. So 1450 has been a pretty big spot of resistance for AMD. They have earnings coming out on Tuesday after the close, and if they disappoint, I think you could see a pullback, and you know, maybe you get a pullback into the $12.50 range. I think that could be an interesting spot to potentially take it for a swing. Could even get more interesting on a pullback to 11.50, right? You pull all the way back to that trend line and 200-day moving average. That could be an interesting spot to take it for a long-term hold or swing position. Thick stock, 793 million shares in the float. If it takes out 1450 with conviction, and not in pre-market, but if it takes out 1450 with conviction, then this could be an interesting spot to look to try and get it, right? 1450, see if it pulls back to there as an area of support. What was resistance becomes support, and look for that as a swing entry or long-term hold. It's not overbought. Stochastics are curling up. If they beat and raise, you could see a pretty nice breakout in AMD, and I think it would last longer than a day. So AMD, more of a swing trade than a day trade, but not saying you couldn't take a day trade, because it does have some pretty nice runs. But a little 2-3 day swing possible with AMD if they have good earnings. And then if they don't, if they have good earnings and it pulls back, and they have good guidance and it pulls back to those levels of potential support, then that's where you look at maybe taking them. JetBlue, right? Really nice looking setup here. This is a big spot. This is a very big spot that JetBlue is trying to get through. 23.50, not overbought. They have earnings on Tuesday before the open, right? And if they beat and they take out 23.50 or $24 with conviction and manage to close above there, that could be the beginning of a decent run in for JetBlue. More of a swing or long-term hold. If they disappoint and we see a pullback, I think the place that it gets really, really compelling, maybe right around $21. A pullback to the 200-day moving average. You've got some price support and resistance in that area. See if that acts as support one more time for a potential bounce. Maybe it doesn't pull all the way back there. Maybe it pulls back to 22. I don't know, but I like JetBlue, and there could be an opportunity to get involved there off of earnings. TRMB. So I mentioned that robotics is one of the things that I think is a really hot sector, and would love to get involved. There are a lot of robotics names reporting this week, and I believe earnings reports, they report on August 2nd. So they've got earnings coming up, this TRMB, but it's got a really nice look. Lower left, upper right, right? Beautiful upward trend, and I think we are dealing with potentially all-time highs, right? Or basically $40 is all-time highs on TRMB. Let me make sure that's accurate here. That's accurate. This is a good looking chart. Lower left to upper right. It is a little ways away from the 200-day. Maybe on a pullback to 35.50 or so, or pullback to the 50-day moving average. That could be an interesting spot potentially for a swing entry or a long-term hold. Looks like they had a big pop off of earnings last quarter and never really came down and filled that gap. Come down and fill that gap to 32.50. That'd be a really nice looking place to try and get involved in TRMB. But 249 million shares in the float. Worth keeping an eye on TRMB for a trend line break. Maybe it runs into earnings. You get a test up into that $40 area. BMY, long-term hold for me. They report earnings on Thursday before the open. Kind of taking out this trend line, right? Just held the arm to the 50-day moving average. Now it is approaching overbought. I'm looking to potentially add to BMY. I'm likely going to own BMY till I, just for as long as I'm on the planet. And if it pulls back down to this $53 area, my first entry was somewhere down here like the $49 area, just under $50. And I could be, if it pulls back to this $53 area, I could be interested in potentially adding. Maybe, if it pulls back there, I'm not going to just jump in it. Maybe if it slices through there, it comes down to this 51.60, 51.70 area, or $52 area. That could be a spot where I may look to add to my position. But I do like the way it's looking right here. It's at a cluster of moving averages, and if the earnings come in fairly decent, I think you're going to go back up and test 58. You take 58 out, I think we're going to get a 60 test and roll potentially on BMY. AT&T, I'm just looking at this. They report earnings. We'll look exactly when. This is a big spot for AT&T for potential price support, right? $36. It's oversold on the weekly time frame. Let's take a look and see. this out to the weekly. And this is a big spot. Kind of got a big double top formation there, right? Big M. Not a great looking chart on the weekly. You know, in this, maybe this is a short, right? I mean, if it breaks below this $36 with some conviction, you know, then maybe you look to put your stop just above $36, right? Uh, could be a short, could be a potential bounce, right? But this is also a tremendously thick stock, 6.1 billion shares in the float, and they report earnings on Tuesday after the close. So potential, you know, potential area of support here at 26 bucks. We'll see if that acts as support. Likely going to have some resistance, maybe somewhere around 38 bucks. Or did I say 26 or 36? I meant 36 bucks. Some support there, and likely some resistance right there around 38 bucks. But we'll see how it all plays out. I am definitely interested to see if that area holds a support. FCX flirting with the 200-day moving average. 1.3 billion shares in the float. Not a big short interest. It's a big, thick stock. It's broke over this trend line. It's at an area of potential resistance here at 13 bucks, flirting with the $13 holla. It reports on where is it? Where? Right here. Tuesday before the open. So just interested to see how they report. If it pulls back into this $12.25 range, or even down to 12 bucks, could be an interesting spot to look to take it for a. If it acts as support there, could be an interesting spot to take it for a swing, for a bounce. And if it takes out the 200-day with some conviction, maybe you get a little short-term swing opportunity there, where it potentially goes up and tests somewhere around $14.50 or $15. On FCX, RMBS, looking at this one in pre-market on Friday, really good looking technical setup, flirting with the 200-day moving average. Reports Monday, and I think it's after the close. Yeah, right after the close. You know, it's got a really sweet looking setup. It's not overbought. If it takes the 200-day out, it's only got 84.5 million shares in the float. I think you can get a test up somewhere in the 1350 area. Likely going to have a little resistance there. Probably a good, decent area to scale. If it could take out 1350, then maybe we get a 14 test, but not too, really kind of a nice look. And the reason for this spike was a rumor that they're looking at potentially putting themselves up for sale. Now, they could come out and debunk that whole thing in their earnings call, and if they have disappointing earnings, then, you know, and they debunk the fact that they are trying to sell themselves, and you could see this thing come crashing all the way back down to where it came from. So keep that in mind. But still, good looking setup on RMBS. YEXT, one of the members in Alpha Wolf Trading has this as a swing, bought it at 13 bucks. Has had a really nice pop pulling back. I'm looking for potential support here around 1340. I think they report the end of August. I'm looking at now this is a recent IPO, but I'm looking at potentially getting involved here on a pullback to $13.40. See if that holds as support. Could be a good entry after a nice little pop and pierce of the upper Bollinger Band. And then you put your stop maybe just below $13, right? But I like the setup on Yext. Very small float, 29 million shares, and 20% short interest, but worth keeping an eye on YEXT. WLL has earnings. Now look, let's see, when do they come out? on Wednesday after the close. Now we're going to have a pretty good indication of maybe how WLL's earnings are going to go, because we're going to have some earnings already out, right? We'll have Helix and Halliburton and Anadarko Petroleum, and I think that's pretty much it. So, I mean, we're going to have an idea of whether or not, this is even going to be worth paying attention to. This could move. I mean, if you get some good earnings out of the sector, this could actually move in anticipation of their earnings. So, potential opportunity there for a trade. We'll look at this daily. Oops. Come on now. So, not an attractive chart, right? I mean, in a downtrend, potentially it's trying to find a base or a bottom, right? It's in an interesting spot for a potential bounce, and maybe it bounces heading into those earnings. I wouldn't hold it through earnings, but this thing could go up and test the trend line, still remain in a downtrend up to about $7. That's a pretty big move from where it currently sits. But this is a thicker stock, 363 million shares in the float, 22% short interest. Could create some kind of a trading, a short-term trading opportunity. Worth keeping an eye on WLL. WFT actually has already kind of had a nice move into their earnings, and I believe they report on Thursday after the close. No, they report Friday morning prior to the open. So that could be interesting for WFT. Maybe it pulls back to the $4 holla as support in advance of those earnings. And then you get a bounce off of $4 from the earnings. We'll see how it plays out, but this is another thick stock, 764 million shares in the float. Could be maybe a day trading opportunity if you get a good entry, or could be a short-term swing, depending. We'll have to see how earnings play out. And let's see what else we've got going on here. I've got just a few more. A-Ray. So A-Ray is actually in one of the robotic ETFs that I like, and they just had some news last week. They gave a little guidance, and the market didn't really respond. It was kind of a yawn event. But what I'm looking at here is that it pulled back to support on Friday, touched the 50 SMA and bounced. 430 seems to be acting as potential price support. It is approaching oversold. I'm looking at this one for potentially a day trading opportunity on a trend line break, and then take out $5. You take out $5, I think that would be a big deal for A-Ray. If it breaks below 433, below the 50-day, and comes down to the $4 area, I think it becomes real compelling for maybe a swing. I'm just looking at going back here, to 2013, right? $4 is a pretty big area for A-Ray to try and hold as support. I think that could be an interesting spot to take it for a bounce. So that's A-Ray. And then we're gonna go. I got hung up on Rays for some reason. I got V-Ray on here as well. CLF reports this week, right? Just tried to take out the 200-day moving average, was unable to do so. But it's over the 50-day, pulling back a little bit, consolidating. Right? Let's see when Cliffs reports. They report Thursday before the open. Definitely worth keeping an eye on Cliffs. 295 million shares in the float. Maybe this pulls back to 650 into before earnings, and then you get a bounce off of 650. it could be a swing type trade opportunity. We'll have to see how earnings come in, but I think it's worth keeping an eye on. Cliffs. AK Steel reports, I believe, Tuesday before the open. Um, they just raised some steel. I think $25 a ton or something like that, some type of steel. This is at. It could, look, we could get a pullback to $6 is kind of what I'm looking at here, and see if that acts as support for a bounce. We'll see what kind of earnings they have. I think AKS typically on earnings does not perform really well, but we'll have to see. Worth keeping an eye on AKS for $6 support. See how it reacts off of earnings. It's got up to the 200-day about $7.50, where we could see some resistance, maybe even $8, depending upon how earnings come in. But I kind of like the look of AK Steel. IMGN reports on Friday before the open. This had a really nice run. Caught a couple of upgrades. $8 price target. I think somebody even put a higher target on it. I don't know where that is, but you got an $8 price target from Lyric in April. It's right at the 50-day. It's right at an area of support. It's oversold. Stochastics are starting to curl to the upside. Maybe it continues to pull back to the $5 area. See if $5 holds as support. That could be an interesting spot maybe to take it for a bounce. You could get a trend line break heading into the earnings. This has only got 71 million shares in the float and almost 20% short interest. So day trade opportunity there. I wouldn't hold it into earnings, but it could get interesting after earnings because of where it sits and potential for a bounce. HLX, they report on Monday before the open. Potentially pulling back to an area of price support around 550. See if that holds as support for a bounce, and if it takes out 625 with conviction, you could get a pretty nice pop in HLX. It's only got 139 million shares in the float. It did just recently kind of break over this trend line here, so I think there could be a setup there. We'll see how it reacts Monday after the earnings. And then V-Ray, which is the last stock I have on my list. And like I said, by no means the only stocks I'm watching next week. I have a pretty comprehensive list of stocks that are on my radar. V-Ray is interesting. I got a little bit of a hit piece out the other day. Cantor Fitzgerald's got an $10 price target on it. Aegis has got an $11 price target on it. They did a private placement for $3 in January. It's at an interesting spot. It's completely out of the lower Bollinger Band. Maybe a snapback trade opportunity in V-Ray. Only 21.7 million shares in the float. Like I said, looking just for a snapback day trading opportunity in V-Ray. Stochastic starting to curl up. If it breaks below 480, then I think maybe somewhere in the $4 area, you start looking in that area for potential support for a bounce. And that is it. That is my list of stocks to watch for this week. Look, be careful, right? Be careful out there. Let's see how this week plays out. It could be a very, very interesting week for the markets. Don't chase. Make sure you know your risk reward on each and every trade. Have a trade plan for each and every trade. And if you're interested in joining the family over at alphawolftrading.com, come check us out. You got any questions on it, hit me up at tim@alphawolftrading.com. Got a great group of people over there, and always looking to add more great people. So if you're interested, hit me up. And make sure you sign up. If you haven't already done so, go to the site and sign up to get this video sent directly to your email each and every week for free. No tricks, just for free. Sign up. All right. Okay, have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy the rest of it. Be safe and have fun.